Final of our three sessions, and I hope that so far you have benefited and got a lot from the original two sessions. Tonight is not really going to be about a lot of new content, and I'll show you that in a little while. But it's going to be very, very reflective because I want us to reflect on the information that we have talked about and discussed over the past two sessions. But also, more importantly, your readiness for that leap into a senior leader's role. So we're going to do a lot of that, a lot of reflection, and we're going to then talk a bit about actually what you can expect in your first role and also at your first interview if you haven't had one already. I did put a little message at the bottom. Nobody has responded to that yet, and it was just to say, has anything been interesting happening in your school? So I presume from that, there's been nothing interesting at all happening at any schools over the last few weeks and months. And I also said, is anyone applying for any senior leaders jobs? So unless you've missed that, if you want to drop something in the box there. Otherwise, I take it that nobody is currently applying for a senior leaders job and nothing interesting has been happening at your school. So we will crack on. Right, excuse me. As a follow-up from session 2, I asked you to do 2 or 3 things, and I just want to cover those for a few minutes now to see if we had any questions or any reaction. The first was about teaching and learning, and I asked you to think about the future of lesson observations and performance management. And we spent quite a long time at the last session talking about different ways really of ascertaining the quality of teaching in your school and how that's changed to a quality of teaching over time. And I asked you, if you had a blank canvas at your school, how would you go about quality assuring the quality of teaching? And again, I don't really want to not necessarily open that up for the chat box because I think that's quite a lengthy question to answer, or a lengthy answer really that I would be expecting. But I just wanted to get you to thinking about that again, and how would you assess the quality of teaching? And what I want to do though is just to ask you as an indication of, in terms of grading, and there's a big debate on it at the moment really because Ofsted have said they're not going to grade lessons anymore, and we talked about that last time. But actually, as schools, it might be slightly different because the reason we grade lessons in school might be slightly different reasons, performance management, pay progression, things like that. And it's just interesting to know, out of all the schools we have represented tonight, how many of you are still grading lessons? So if you just put in the chat box, yes or no, are you grading lessons or not at your school, or are you not grading lessons? And that would be just an interesting way to see where we are. Yes. Right, so we're all still grading lessons. It's interesting because I think the general consensus with a lot of people as well, if Ofsted aren't doing it, we don't need to do it. But I think we need to be very clear about why Ofsted don't do it, or why they did do it, and why as schools we might want to do it. So yeah, that's an interesting thought there, to see that. And I was at a conference yesterday in London, and it was probably around about 2/3 of the schools were still grading lessons, and only 1/3 had gone to something different. Which brings me on to just briefly again talking about, if you had a blank canvas, and how would you go about assuring the quality of teaching. I was given a sheet yesterday which I just wanted to go through with you now in terms of the different ways that you can evaluate the quality of teaching. And this may be where you want to kind of jot some of these ideas down, because there are lots of different ways that schools around the country are evaluating the quality of teaching. Some, like all of us here, are still grading lessons, and my school is exactly the same in that respect. And that would be more of a traditional model of a lesson observation and a grade from that. But the other things that I just want to go through with you, and like I say, you can write these down if you wish. Some schools are doing lesson observations just for performance management and nothing else. So they're not actually using it to grade the quality of teaching across the school. Some are just using it as a developmental focus with no grades. So actually, there is an observation that takes place, no grade at all, very, very developmental. This is, your kind of what went well's, EBIs, but no grading attached at all. Which I think personally I'd kind of like to get to, because I think it's a far more structured and developmental conversation that you can have with a member of staff. Because I think, like I said to you last time, as soon as you start to mention the words requires improvement, or good, or outstanding, then people either shut down, they don't want to hear it, or they don't want to listen anymore because they've heard the right words, they've heard the word good, and that's all they were bothered about. So that's one approach. Other ones other schools are using are an open door approach, where you can go in and visit any class at any time. It's an open door approach to teaching and learning, really, and more of a kind of a learning walks scenario, where you can gather information randomly across a period of time. Staff, another one is where staff are filming themselves, and they're using that film for developmental purposes. And again, it's all developmental. Learning walks we've already talked about. Pupil voice, lots of schools using pupil voice. I think there's a danger to that in placing too much emphasis on pupil voice, but certainly as part of a selection or a range of strategies, then pupil voice would be important, because Ofsted use pupil voice as well. And data analysis. So I spoke to somebody, an Ofsted inspector, who is currently working in quite a number of schools on an ad hoc basis, really helping those schools improve. And he said to me, well, I don't need to visit any lesson at all to know what the quality of teaching is like. I just need to look in the books and look at the data you give me, and that's it. And that's quite it's quite a worrying thought sometimes, because if they're never even going to step foot in a lesson, then your books need to be absolutely top notch, and it places so much importance on the data. But when you take a step back and look at it, well, you think, well, yeah, if the books aren't very good and the data's not very good, then the teaching can't be good anyway. So it's just a thought there to think about how we might be moving forward as schools and as education, and that might be the way forward that inspections take in the future at some point. So that was that. I just wanted to share that with you. I also asked you to download and read the Sutton Trust Toolkit. I just want to open the chat window. Did anybody find anything interesting? Was there anything that was kind of quite surprising, or was there anything that anyone wants to share? With what they found from the Sutton Trust Toolkit about the different interventions that work, and the work in school and the impact they had. If anyone's got any thoughts on that, then feel free to drop them in. And as well as that, if anyone has got anything they would like to add about the John Hattie's work on visible learning and and his interventions, again, very, very interesting reading, both the Sutton Trust Toolkit and John Hattie's work. And if you've managed to do that, then if you want to drop something in the chat box that you found interesting, then great. And also, it may be that you have already read it and actually started to implement some of those. And again, if you have, tell us what it's been like. Tell us what the impact's been like. If you haven't, and you haven't had a chance to do that, or I've suddenly given you a nudge and reminded you, then it's something that you need to do. I would strongly advise you to do, to download and to read the work of those two people there. And if you haven't done so